Okie dokie.
Starting off with Paris Promenade, this track doesn't have many shortcuts, but there is one right at the start through these Prada plant wooden cutouts. The best path after the glider is going on the left side, as this way is a lot faster. However, if you're in dire need of an extra item box, go straight. And you can take the beginning shortcut at the end of the track. Next, for Toad's Circuit, you can use 3 mushrooms to cut on all the grass in the inside. After the turn, you can use a mushroom to this ramp, and then right after, you can cut through all of this off-road with another mushroom. And if you want to, you can use a mushroom to go really tight in the off-road. You don't actually need a mushroom for the ramp shortcut, because you can just hop through all of the off-road. And next track on our list is Choco Mountain, and you can use a mushroom to cut right through this bit of off-road here, and right after there's a small bit of off-road you can cut right here. And at the final turn, there's a bit of off-road you can cut off with a mushroom. Now at the triple ramp sections, you want to stop accelerating trick, accelerate trick, and trick again so you get on all 3 trick ramps. Now at the very beginning of Coconut Mall, you can use a mushroom to cut through this bit of a store. Now at the glider section, when you go off of it, you can hold down on your joystick and cut behind this palm tree with 2 mushrooms. On both laps 1 and 2 of Tokyo Blur, you can use a mushroom to cut this ramp. However, both can be done completely shroomless. Next on Shroom Ridge, you can use a mushroom to get all the way to this glider. And after the tunnel section, you can use a mushroom to cut onto that pipe that blows you up. Next for Sky Garden, there's 2 leaves here you can just bounce off of right at the start of the track. And a little bit after, if you go off of this ramp and avoid tricking off of the mushroom, you can mushroom through this bit of off-road. And then a little bit after, you can mushroom through that vine right there. The start of Ninja Hideaway, you can trick off of that bit of stone there, and if you choose to take the bottom path, there are 2 piranha plants you can cut through right here. However, if you take the top path, you can drift off right here, and cut through the piranha plants without a mushroom. Keep in mind though that this can be very tricky and precise. And in this clip, I did it way too rough. Meaning I lost my mini turbo, but you can keep it if you bump into the wall at the right angle. Now for New York Minute, this track only has a single shortcut on laps 1 and 3, being that grass cut with a mushroom. Mario Circuit 3 is shortcut heaven. You can use 2 mushrooms to cut through all of this sand. And right after, there's some more sand you can cut through with 2 mushrooms. And then a little bit down the straightaway, you can actually take this turn a lot more tightly without a mushroom. And then right after, you can use another mushroom to cut through that sand. And then finally, at the end of the track, there are 2 walls you can cut in between. However, finally is what I would say if this shortcut never existed. Next for Calamari Desert, there's actually a glider off to the side of the track that you can get to with a mushroom, which gives you the perfect alignment to use another mushroom to get to the second glider. This next shortcut is massive. Keep in mind that you need to spread apart the usage of your 3 mushrooms, which just barely gets you to the other side. Now a fairly basic one, you can use a mushroom to get to this ramp. Now at the end of the train track section on lap 3, you can use a single mushroom to cut through there. Waluigi Pinball does not have a single shortcut throughout the entire track. Next for Sydney Sprint, right at the start of the track there's a bit of grass here you can cut off on all 3 laps. On lap 2, there are 2 back-to-back shortcuts. Starting off with this grass cut you can do with a single mushroom by hopping out at the end, and then right after there's another grass cut here, just be careful of the rocks. And again, on lap 2, there's some grass here you can cut off right before the glider. Snowland has a massive shortcut right here. However, be careful doing this since it is very easy to get picked up by Lakitu on accident. Next are two back-to-back shortcuts through these walls right here, and then there's a snow ramp shortcut right here. Next for Mushroom Gorge, right at the start of the track you can use a mushroom off to the side. Be careful not to trick off of the first mushroom though, as that can just throw you off. Then right after the second mushroom set, there is some grass you can cut through. Now entering the cave of Mushroom Gorge, you want to drift off to the side, get a mini turbo, and bounce off of the first mushroom to instantly reach the green ones. And then right after, be careful not to drift on the mushrooms because that can slow you down, and then you want to use a mushroom and jump off the side of the turn to do the gap jump. London Loop has a few grass cuts, starting with this one where you need to stretch out 2 usages of a mushroom. And the second grass cut is where you can use 2 mushrooms to cut behind the chain chomp on the second lap. The only shortcut on Boo Lake is where if you drift off the side of this track you can go in between the wall and the grass there. And near the end of Rock Mountain there is a ramp off to the side that you can use to trick off of. Now during the glider section, instead of going straight to the ground, you can actually use a glider to go across both of these pipes. Remember how in my first part I said that there's actually a such thing as golden mushroom shortcuts? No joke, there's actually a such thing of golden mushroom shortcut. Well, Rock Mountain actually has one near the end of the track. On the glider section, if you take this pipe to go in the air a little bit, you can actually use the glider to cut across this grass without any mushroom. And then once you touch the grass, you can start using your golden mushroom to go all across it, going behind the ramp instead of tricking off of it. The crazy part is, you don't actually need a golden mushroom to cross this, as you can cross this with a few other items, such as a star, or a whole set of triple mushrooms into a bullet bill. Keep in mind when you use the bullet bill, make sure you're somewhere around behind the trick ramp. Just try not to cut the whole thing with the bullet bill. As sad as it sounds, Wee Maple Tree Way only has a single shortcut at the start with a mushroom. Berlin Byways has 2 very simple grass cuts. One right there, and then there's another one right here. Barely save time, but they're worth it. And the final grass cut on Berlin Byways is on the second and third laps where you can just cut behind these trees in the grass here. Next up for Peach Gardens, a shortcut that has been in both Mario Kart DS and Wii, and it's back and better than ever. You can use a mushroom right there to cut through the grass. And then after the Piranha Plant, you can actually use mushrooms to cut through the grass here on all 3 laps. Fairy Mountain has a grass cut right at the start of the track. And right after the trick ramp with the anti-gravity section, there's a massive single mushroom shortcut. I guess there are a lot more tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe without shortcuts than I thought, because 3DS Rainbow Road continues on with that trend. Amsterdam Drift has a very small grass cut at the start of the track. After the glider section, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through this bit of grass right here. Finally, after the water section on the final lap, you can use a mushroom to cut through all this grass. And then there's a second bit of grass right here you can cut with. Next for Riverside Park, at the beginning there is a mushroom shortcut here. Then after the trick ramp, you can use a mushroom to cut through this grass, and right after, you can use a mushroom to cut through the grass and all this mud. Next for DK Summit, if you use a mushroom, you can cut through that bit of snow right there. And then right after, if you avoid tricking off of the last few bumps, instead you drift to the direction of this little spot here, you want to release a mini turbo, start drifting the other direction, and then just let the drift take you along the path. Oh hey, a shortcut from the original still works! Next up for Yoshi's Island, at the start of the track you can use a mushroom to cut through this bit of off-road right here. And then after the tunnel section, you can use a mushroom to cut through this bit of off-road right here. Now during the glider section, there's this little question mark cloud here that you can hit to reveal this bridge that'll take you along a faster lines on the track. However, if you miss it or just decide not to go for it, if you have 2 mushrooms, you can cut across all this orange off-road here. I can only assume it's orange grass. Now for Bangkok Rush. During the glider section, instead of going straight, you can turn towards this bit of grass here, and then use a mushroom through the grass to cut off a pretty decent portion of the track. Now for DS Mario Circuit, at the beginning of the track there's a bit of an off-road cut right here. Now at the section with the piranha plants that spit fire, you can cut through the sand with a mushroom. And then right after with another mushroom, you can cut through these trees right here. And then you can use a mushroom to cut all through those trees right there. Now at the end of the track, if you delay your mushroom, you can use one to cut through all that off-road. Next for Waluigi Stadium, if you drift off of the ramp, it just gives you the best lines to use a mushroom to go through the mud right there. However though, if you don't have a mushroom, you can drift off and take a tighter angle, try to hug the wall on the inside lines here. There is no mud, so you won't slow down. Next is near the end of the track, you can use a mushroom to cut through a bit of the mud right there. At the start of Singapore Speedway, there's a very small bit of grass here you can cut off on both first and second laps. Now on the second lap, going near the end, there's a bit of grass here you can cut off with a mushroom right before the glider. Now near the end of the lap 3, there's a bit of grass here you can cut off with a mushroom. Next for Athens Dash, after the ramp at the start, if you go really off to the left, you can drive here. That's not considered out of bounds for some reason. And then a little bit after, you can use another mushroom to cut through that grass. Now after the triple ramp section, you can go all the way down to this grass patch and skip part of that turn. And near the ends of laps 2 and 3, you can use a mushroom to go through the piranha plant cutouts. However, you don't actually need a mushroom for this shortcut since you can just break them with the green shell. Now while entering lap 3, you can just hop across the grass there. And finally at the end of lap 3, you can just hop through this grass into this little cave here, which can give you an extra item box. Daisy Cruiser is another track that does not have a single shortcut. Once again, Moonview Highway does not have a single shortcut. Now while going into the Bath Drain of Squeaky Clean Sprint, you can use a mushroom to go in that ring that somehow found its way there for some reason. And then whenever you exit, you can use a mushroom to go in the soap and make sure to bonk into the fan to make sure you don't get blown by it. However, if you're really good, you can actually drift off of that and then try to get on the paper clips and I think it's a nut there or something. Now for Los Angeles laps, watch closely because there are 3 back-to-back shortcuts, starting off with a mushroom through the sand here that you can hop out at the end, and then after these ramp sections, you can drift off the ramp to take this turn faster, and then use a mushroom all throughout that sand. And then a little bit after the crabs, there's another sand cut right here. And then now onto the second lap, there is a bit of grass here under that little arch area you can cut under. Now into the construction zone, you can use a mushroom to get to the glider. And then approaching the end, there is a bit of grass here you can cut off. And then there's some more grass right here you can cut off. Surprisingly, Sunset Wilds actually has a decent amount of shortcuts. Like you can use a mushroom to cut off this entire turn. Then after the turn, you can use a mushroom to get to this ramp that's in the off-road. Then you can cut the final turn by using a mushroom through the sand. And at the beginning of the track, there's another turn here you can cut off that I forgot about earlier. And then you can actually do this one shortcut without a mushroom. If you manage to neutral drift through that bit of road, you won't slow down since there's no off-road. Next track is Scuba Cape, and you can use a mushroom at the start to cut through this bit of grass. And next, if you take a tight turn here, you can actually cut off that whole turn. However though, I highly recommend that you practice this shortcut on time trials instead of trying to do it online right away, since this shortcut could be very difficult and precise to do. And next, if you go through the tunnel, you can cut through the grass there. If you drift out of the pipe, you can use a mushroom to go through the water stream there. And after the glider of Vancouver Velocity, you can use a mushroom to cut through this grass onto the second lap. Now into the tunnel, you can use 2 mushrooms to cut through the off-road here to take the turn a lot tighter. No, I didn't forget about this shortcut, but it can be done shroomless. Next for Romavanti, you can use a mushroom to cut through that archway right there. And then a little bit after down the track, going through this little U-turn here, you can trick down these stairs, drift here, and then use a mushroom through the off-road. Then at the final turn, you can use a mushroom through the off-road there. Next is DK Mountain, and you can use a mushroom to cut through these barrels right at the start of the track. Now on this rocky section, if you trick off to the side of the last ramp, you can get on top of there for some reason. And then right after, if you take a really tight drifting angle after going up there, you can do the DK Jungle Gap Jump. Like what I said before in Koopa Cape, I highly recommend that you practice this one in time trials, because this one can be very annoying to get the right alignment so you don't bump into the wall or something. Now for Daisy Circuit, you can go through this Piranha Plant cutout with a mushroom here that will take you to a glider. Next for Piranha Plant Cove, if you drift off of this side, you can use a mushroom through this bit of off-road. And then a little bit after, you can drift off of that other ramp, and then you can go for this off-road, cut half of it, and then use a mushroom through the rest. And then on the second lap, you can cut through a bit of this off-road, and then use a mushroom through it all. A little bit after, right before going on to the final lap, you can cut off that bit of off-road with a mushroom. And then on the final lap, you can use a mushroom to cut through here to go on this little trick ramp to cut that entire turn. And finally, there are two simple grass cuts at the end of the track, like this one here that you can use a mushroom to cut through that bit of the turn right there. And then a little bit after this turn right here, you can keep going, and then at the final turn of the final lap, you can cut off a turn right here with the mushroom. Next for Madrid Drive, you can drift off to the side here and cut off some hidden grass right there. Now while entering this plaza on the second lap, you can actually cut in between all of those tables and umbrellas right there, I think they are. And now during the glider section, if you go off to the side instead of going straight, you can use a mushroom to cut through the grass and take a lot tighter turn. And the final shortcut on Madrid Drive is cutting through this bit of grass on the final lap. Now for Rosalina's Ice World, you can cut off the final turn by taking this little ramp off to the side. There is a shortcut right at the start right here, but you might miss an item box doing this. Now for Bowser's Castle 3, you can take a mushroom through here, but honestly it's not really faster. The final track of today's video is Wee Rainbow Road, and you can start off by that one gap jump right there. And now after the cannon glider, if you drift here, if you drift on the boost panels, you can cut off the entire half pipe like that.